When you get stitches, a doctor threads a needle through your wound and pulls it tight to close the skin. As the stitches hold the edges together, the wound becomes inflamed as new cells begin to repair the tissue. Afterwards, connective tissues and collagens start to create skin. Then, blood vessels form to nourish these developing tissues, filling in the area. And over a few weeks, the wound will have healed together and the stitches are removed. If you get a splinter, most people just go ahead and pull them out. But sometimes they get lodged so deep into your skin that you can't reach them. If the area gets infected, it will start to swell as pus forms under the skin. This creates pressure around the splinter that can sometimes push it upwards towards the skin's surface. And if you're lucky, after a certain period of time, your body could have completely removed it from your skin. If you somehow removed all of the blood vessels in your body and tied them together, you might think it would be about this long. But the human body has thousands of these tiny vessels that weave in and out of every body part. And with all of them combined, if you started in New York, your blood vessels would make it all the way to the Grand Canyon. It would go on to reach all the way across the Pacific Ocean, over Japan, Asia, and all of Europe. And not only would it make it all the way back to your starting point, but it would be able to make this trip 2 to 4 times. When a doctor gives you a shot, they can sometimes accidentally push the needle all the way through your vein, which ends up puncturing both sides. Once the needle is removed, it leaves 2 holes in the vein. And before the body can thicken the blood and seal these holes, it bleeds into the surrounding tissues. This leaked blood forms a dark, tender area under the skin, creating bruises and splotchy areas. When one of your adult teeth, the bone where the tooth once was can start to deteriorate. To prevent further damage, a dentist will fill the cavity with a synthetic material that mimics real bone. Once filled, a metal bracket is secured on top and the incision is closed. After the graft has healed, a large implant post is inserted into the new bone. Then a small metal piece is screwed in and a porcelain tooth is secured on top. If you accidentally touched a table saw, you'd probably think your fingers would be cut off. But this isn't always the case. You see, some modern high-end saws actually know the difference between wood and your skin. Once your finger comes in contact with these special saws, it immediately detects the electrical conductivity from your skin. This triggers an immediate mechanical response that stops the blade in less than 5 milliseconds. When a honeybee stings a human, they actually get stuck for a while and can't leave. And this is because their stinger is barbed, which means it can't retract once it's lodged into something. But once the bee finally pulls away, its insides get ripped out because the stinger stays in the skin. This leaves the bee without some of its internal organs, resulting in its death. Have you ever wondered about this little dangly thing at the back of your throat? Well, even though it looks like a miniature punching bag, it actually serves a handful of important functions. You see, when you swallow food, this thing called a uvula actually swings backwards to prevent the food from going up your nose. It's also constantly producing saliva to keep the throat moist, which aids in swallowing. And because there's a tiny muscle inside the uvula, it can move around, which helps you speak. If you're trapped in the trunk of a vehicle, you should immediately start searching for the glow-in-the-dark release hatch. If you don't see the latch, don't panic. Trunks are not airtight, so there's no risk of running out of oxygen. Try feeling around the edges of the trunk for a handle. This may allow you to release the seat back. As a last resort, kick out one of the brake lights. This small opening will allow you to signal for help. Imagine waking up in a coffin and realizing that you were mistakenly buried alive. Now, this wouldn't happen with the medical guidelines we have today, but in the 19th century, old coffins were found with scratch marks on the inside, making this a legitimate concern. So as a solution, they started adding strings inside the coffins that traveled up to the ground and were connected to a little bell. And if you woke up underground in a coffin, you could just ring the bell, signaling that you're still alive. If you're stuck in a water slide that's filling up with water, most people think they should try to climb back up. But the slippery surface makes this nearly impossible. Instead, focus on staying calm and try to create space for air by tilting your head back. If water keeps rising, use your hands to push yourself forward. If you can't move, brace yourself as the water fills the slide entirely. Once the pressure equalizes, you may be able to push forward and float to safety. If you get a skin tag, some people think you can just rip them off yourself, but you actually shouldn't do this. You see, skin tags are connected to your body by a thin piece of tissue, and if you looked inside of it, the tag actually has its own nerves and blood vessels. Ripping it off would cause significant bleeding, and the open wound would be susceptible to infection. Instead, if you want them removed, a doctor can freeze them off with liquid nitrogen, which is a better option. Have you ever wondered why the letter E isn't used to grade? Teachers use A, B, C, D, and F, but they skip E. Why is this? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. You see, back in the day, schools did use the letter E, but in the 1930s, they decided to stop after students and parents thought that it meant excellent. It was quickly replaced with F, because F for failed made more sense. The soldier's foot would break through a hidden bamboo slat and into a hole if they stepped onto a cartridge trap. Inside, a bullet was positioned on top of a nail that was fastened to a wooden board. And when the soldier's foot hit this shell, it pushed the nail into the primer. This caused the shell to suddenly explode and shoot back up at the soldier. If you plucked out a single strand of your hair, it could hold about 40 pennies without breaking. But if you braid just half of all your hair into a rope, the combined strength could hold up a large SUV. And if you add in all of your hair into the rope, it could withstand about 15 metric tons, which is about the weight of a young gray whale. When you use a derma roller, it pushes a bunch of tiny needles into your face, creating small punctures across the surface. Your brain perceives these small holes as wounds, which triggers your body's natural healing response. The body then sends out cells to make collagen and elastin, which helps your skin stay firm and stretchy. Over time, these cells strengthen the skin, giving a firmer and more youthful appearance. If you chip a piece off of your tooth, a dentist might shave down the surrounding area. Then a bonding material that matches your tooth color is applied and shaped to match the original appearance. Once the shape is near perfect, a special light hardens the material, making it as durable as the tooth. Finally, the dentist polishes the tooth to blend it seamlessly with the others. If you stepped on a World War II landmine, 3 prongs hidden just beneath the surface would immediately sense the pressure. This pressure would release a striker pin, activating a fuse. Then, an initial explosion propels the mine upwards, reaching about waist height. In the air, the fuse reaches the main charge inside, causing the mine to explode. The casing shatters, ejecting metal fragments at high speeds in all directions. If you touch a cactus, you'll probably get the spine stuck in your skin. And if you try to pull them out, you can actually break them off in your flesh because they're so fragile. So instead, you should apply a layer of glue over the area. Once it is dried, quickly peel it off in a smooth motion. This will pull out the spines evenly, causing them to stay intact. They opened the pallet of ammunition only to find it was full of Tootsie Rolls. You see, Tootsie Roll was a code name for mortar rounds, which the Marines desperately needed. But the radio operator who received the order didn't know that and sent the actual candy instead. At first, the Marines were angry, but the sub-freezing temperatures had frozen all their food, and the candies ended up sustaining them over the next few days. They even used them to plug bullet holes by warming them up and letting them freeze in place. And eventually, the real mortar rounds did arrive. If you swallowed a watermelon seed, some people think that it could potentially sprout in your stomach, meaning you'd literally be growing a watermelon inside of you. Now, this is obviously not true. Your stomach acid would dissolve the seed before it had time to grow. But there was a case of a man who swallowed a pea that ended up going down the wrong way. And months later, after being rushed to the hospital because of breathing problems, a doctor discovered that the pea had been ingested in the man's lung. And because lungs are warm and moist, the pea was able to split open and sprout into a plant. The army ant is placed on the wound and positioned so its jaws clamp tightly on the edges, securing them together. Then the ant's body is twisted off, leaving its head and mandibles in place, which acts as a stitch. More are added depending on the size of the wound, and these ant stitches are left in the skin until the edges of the wound stay closed on their own. When you pump gas in your car, there's this tiny hole connected to a valve that sucks in air. This air intake keeps the fuel flowing smoothly as it fills your car. But as soon as the tank is full, the gas covers this hole, stopping the airflow and creating a vacuum inside. And this change in pressure triggers the pump to stop the flow of gas. You know the equal sign in math? Well, back in the day, people actually wrote is equal to instead. And mathematician Robert Ricord was getting tired of writing it over and over. So in 1557, he started using two horizontal lines instead. He figured since the two lines were the same size, they were equal to each other, which made it the perfect symbol for equality. If an octopus loses some of its limbs and then somehow makes it back into the ocean, you might think it would die from the open wounds. But they have an ability that allows them to quickly seal the cut before it becomes infected. Once the wounds begin to heal, new cells can start to reconstruct the missing limbs. And after several weeks, new fully functional tentacles regrow. If you took out one of your bones and somehow molded it into a chunk about this big, you might think it would be completely crushed under the weight of a car. But human bones are actually made of a tough mix of minerals and a stretchy protein called collagen. And this makes them so strong that a single cubic inch can support the weight of nearly 5 standard cars.